Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My name is Mark Otabo, and you are watching The Big Issue. The judiciary has oftentimes been regarded as the last hope of the common man. Thus said, the independence of the judiciary is an utmost quest that must be pursued, if not by all, at least anyone who believes in equity and fairness, which is the trust of our social contract. Judicial independence can be defined as a total freedom of the judicial arm from the executive and legislature arms of government. Now, the purpose of this is to ensure the entrenchment of democracy and limit the overbearing power of the executive arm of government. Now, lately, developments of the judicial scene has put loads of questions on the minds of so many who may have always seen the judiciary as the home for justice. Now, some critics have gone ahead to question the true state of the judiciary as an independent entity in a democratic Nigeria. Now, one of such people who believes that the judiciary may have lost its cap of independence in recent times is Professor Chris Mustafa Nwaokobia, a former presidential aspirant under the Liberal Democracy Party of Nigeria in 2011. He's also the initiator of Country First, a Nigerian redemption movement, a lawyer, writer, columnist, and principal counsel of the Grand House of Law. Ladies and gentlemen, come on, put your hands together for him. You can do better than that. Come on now. Well, on the other hand, Barrister Odiana Eriata is a principal partner at Eriata and Partners, former principal partner at Pat Dapper and Associates. He has also worked at Falana and Falana's Chambers, and he's also saying, come on, the judiciary is definitely independent. Come on, put your hands together for him. Good to have you. Now you can do better than that. Now, I'll begin with you first, Odiana. Now, you are of the opinion that the judiciary is independent. Now, you might want to make your case quickly and start off this show.
Well, essentially, I'm always on the very strong view that the judiciary is independent to the extent of the provision in the Constitution, except that its practicability, we have our reservations. Yeah. But that is not to say that we completely demonize the judiciary and perhaps come to the conclusion that the judiciary is not independent. Well, most of us, even if we are not lawyers, we have also watched events in this country that as of today, there could be some sense of interference. But do not forget that all over the world, there's always drive by the executive to interfere with the affairs of the judiciary. It's not peculiar with Nigeria. In the case of Nigeria, right from 1982 and all that, some of the states in the Middle Belt experienced some sense of interference by the executive arm of government, whereas the Constitution has separated the legislative arm by virtue of Chapter 5, the executive arm by virtue of Chapter 6, and judicial arm, which is the judicature, by virtue of Chapter 7. But that does not mean it has to be in a watertight, segment. There must be somehow some sense of collaboration. But because of the judgments that we see today, Nigerians are beginning to have the mindset or the conclusion that the judiciary is no longer independent. I am not of that view. Yes, I will agree that there are some sense of push in that direction. But it's not enough for us to demonize judiciary. It's not enough for us to say no, that the judiciary is no longer independent in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Nwaokobia, what's your view quickly?
First, I will sympathize with my colleague and brother, because it's indeed an uphill task to understanding the reality of the Nigerian situation today, to argue that the judiciary is independent. It's one of the most difficult things to do. It is like asking a man to give birth to a child. The truth is, and clearly so, that in 1962-1963, certain Justice Shoemimo, when he was sitting over the case that involved Chief Obafemi Awolowo of blessed memory regarding the treasonable case matter, he did say that he would have done something a bit differently, but that he couldn't do otherwise because his hands were tied. And when we talk about the independence of the judiciary arm of government, we're talking about removing the judiciary from control, from interference, from overbearing influence, from the meddlesomeness of the executive. Tragically, have we achieved that? The answer is a capital letter yes or no. And the answer is no. I want to say that lately, like your opening remark, lately we have seen monumental interference in the activities of the judiciary. Tragically, we have seen government, and it didn't just start with this present administration. We saw it with the case of Ayo Salami under the Jonathan administration, where because certain elements in the political sphere, certain political operators did not like the way he was going with matters regarding the issues at the level of the Federal Court of Appeal, they machinated and manipulated the process such that he was removed and, if you like, retired. Just recently, we saw the case of Justice Onogan, the Chief Justice of the Federation. And everybody knows, it's like daybreak, that what happened regarding the removal was less than proper. And when we talk about the judiciary and the need for independence, we're not just talking about something that should be right. We're talking about something that is imperative. Yeah. That is why the symbol, the audience knows that the symbol of mother justice is a blind woman. It shouldn't see. It should dispense of justice. It should dispense of justice fairly and squarely. But unfortunately, what we do today is like the people who do Niger bet. You sit down at home and conjecture and contemplate what will happen with respect to judicial matters and cases in the courts of law. You begin to think. We actually make conjectures these days whether the APC chairman or the PDP chairman will influence one judge or the other and get judgment for, or justice, if you like, for his party. So tragically, and that's where it bothers the carapace of my mind. Tragically, the judiciary is not only losing its independence, it is dancing naked in the theater of less than proper conduct.
Come on. Well, Odiana, you heard all the accusations and all the cases he tendered. Now, how would you defend your stand still that the judiciary is absolutely independent?
Anyway, from Professor Nwaokobia's opening remark, I will agree with him that Odiana's position today is a very difficult one. But at the same time, as a lawyer, I have a very strong view that we must not continue to demonize the judiciary. Because the judicial sector and the operatives or the managers of that sector are part of this society. And we also must not take a step away from the fact that the judicial system has also handed down some fantastic judgments, irrespective of this pretense of distraction, which is a bit political in all ramification. You agree with me. You agree with me, and I also know that Chris will also agree with me that during the time of Obasanjo as the president of this country, when Asiwaju was the governor, His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu was the governor of Lagos State, the Supreme Court that we are saying no, no, no today handed down a fantastic judgment trying to distinguish I'll call it now, the liberality of the third segment of the government, which is the local government. And the Supreme Court said, at no point does the same Supreme Court, any other enactment, gives the federal government power to withhold the allocation that was meant for Lagos State or local governments in Lagos State. At that point, and at that time, I am sure my friend and the audience will agree that also the judiciary is actually independent. My friend will also agree with me, even if we do not entirely agree with that judgment, that as a lawyer, if you have some facts that are not being contradicted, there's always tendency for the justices or judges to perhaps see that as unchallenged and fast in the instant case. in my closet, I may not entirely agree with the judgment, but the process of handling that judgment, you agree with them, that to some extent, there's justice in this case.
Come on, put your hands together. Yeah, I'll come to you. I'll come to you. Yeah, I'll come to you.
Nigerians and you and I said, oh, that judgment was wrong. We move on to Bayelsa. As of today, people also saying, why must the person who did not win an election be made the governor of the state? But so many of us do not have our mind to the fourth alteration in the Constitution. That once you are nominated as a governor, as a governorship candidate, you have the right, or your party have the right, to nominate the deputy governor. At that point, we are supposed to nominate somebody who is qualified in every ramification and in line with the laws of the land. If at the end of the day, for one reason or the other, you refuse or neglect to nominate somebody who is qualified for every intent and purposes, and you made him the deputy governor, and the law has said that the deputy governor and the governor, that they swim and sink together, to what extent do we now blame Supreme Court for giving strict interpretation to the Constitution?
All right, now, he said, now, if I recall quickly, he said strict interpretation has been given to the Constitution with regards to the judgment he mentioned now. But you are still of the opinion that they are not independent. Now, how would you really justify your position based on the cases he has actually presented before the House?
Let me say, firstly, that when you pick up cases and then you want to use it to adumbrate or accentuate the position my brother here has taken, which is, of course, that the judiciary is independent, then it belies the fundamentals here, which is one, that with respect to Imo State, the nuances of the ruling party, the APC, was manifest before that judgment. They wanted a state by all means necessary and possible in the southeast. So they had to, I heard that a certain prophet had to prophesy about the coming of a governor who came fourth in an election that obviously he didn't win. And don't forget that those who, as it were, in that matter, the cases, the facts that were pleaded in court, before the Supreme Court, before all the other courts, were that certain results were nullified at the level of INEC. The Supreme Court decided, of course you know that the South is predominantly a non-APC state. They decided to gift the APC a state in the Southeast. And that's why the Imo judgment is still an issue, not only in Nigeria, but all over the world. The international community is raising a major issue regarding it because we're lawyers, but whether we like it or not, the magic of number 4 becoming number 1 is still a certain wonderment for all of us. Then, indeed, and interestingly, when the late Justice Chukwudi Oputa made that inimitable quote of his, that we're not final, we're not infallible because we're final, but we're final because we're infallible because we're final. You know, we're not infallible because we're final, but the other way around. When he did say that, he was talking about the fact that when the Supreme Court gives verdict, because it's the last court of the land, you give it a presumption of finality and infallibility. But what we're talking about here is, and that's why, interestingly, in the magnanimity of the consciences of the justices of the Supreme Court, they're going to hear the Imo case again. But with respect to Bayelsa, like my brother has rightly noted, the governor and his deputy run a joint ticket. Okay. And so the judgment of the Supreme Court is so very clear. If they had voided the candidacy of a certain winner, then his votes become null and void. So that argument as to whether the votes, whether the present governor, the new governor of Bayelsa State got the 2/3 of votes in several, does not count because those votes of the former governor-elect, David Leon, is voided. But I want to say that these pockets of seeming judicial strength does not remove the fact that while we have, and this is very fundamental, and I hope the viewers at home and the audience here understands this fundamental issue, that the reason the 2019 election has given us the highest number of electoral petitions in this country is because what politicians do now is they go win by all means possible, believing that they can compromise the judiciary.
Come on.
At the end of the day, They rig elections, and then they are confident that, oh, after all, the judiciary has judges who are human beings. So when you take money there, and through executive control and interference, you can get victory. That is why, for the first time in the history of our country, we've had the highest number of electoral petitions before our courts. And I think that the time has come for us to call a spade by its name and tell the judiciary that they must assert their independence, and tell the executive that they should stop their meddlesome interference in the activities.
Come on, put your hands together. I'm coming to you now. Now, with everything you have revealed, obviously, when people go to court, they have evidence to present before the court and say, look, I think I have a case here. And in most of these petitions, we understand that a lot of them also have their evidences. You see them, I have videos, I have tapes, I have pictures to actually buttress their point and whatever. Now, would you condemn an arm totally? Would you say they are not independent because of pockets of, misdemeanors like this, mishaps like this? I mean, you are also a legal practitioner. You understand how it goes, and it's not perfect all over the world. So are you going to stand here and say Nigeria doesn't stand a chance, or it's so bad in this part of the world?
No, I wouldn't do that.
Okay.
But you know what? When you have an ocean and then you have a stream, you make your deductions and you make your conjectures. What I'm saying is that the preponderant number of issues regarding the judiciary, and let's take graphic instances. The executive invades the homes of judicial officers, breaks down their doors, arrests them. That tells you that the judiciary is not independent.
I'll hang you there a bit. You heard him? You heard him. There's more like, yes, you take it up from there.
That is why I admitted initially that my position is a bit difficult. As a lawyer who also believes in due process, I will agree with him on that point, that there were certain
mishaps here and there.
Mishaps by or interference by the executive arm of government, which were not clearly in line with the laws of the land. But that again, it just lead you of all that we're talking about judiciary of today. For me, it's still the hope of the common man.
All right.
Let me say this, and clearly so, that when you look at what happens in other climes, like you noted, when the people make imputes regarding the appointment of judges,
right,
the likelihood of the judiciary being the last hope of the common man is guaranteed. But tragically, what we have on our hands is, don't forget that boyhood teachings that we had from our parents, that he who pays the piper calls the tune. It actually calls the tune. Now, what we have, he who appoints can sack. And that's exactly what we saw in the Ayo Salami issue. That's what we saw in the Onoga issue. And then what we must do, because I think that that's the primary reason, that's the primacy for which this topic is. What we must do is to ask for a review of the appointing protocols. We must not allow the executive interfere and meddle with the process of the appointment of judges.
Come on. We must not allow the executive meddle with the process of the Constitution and, of course, the law. It's been an exciting moment right here, of course, with our debaters, and we do need to take a break right now. And when we return, of course, the big subject continues, and it is still very, very pertinent. The judiciary, is it an independent body or not? And we have two amazing gentlemen here doing justice to it. If you're just joining us, this is still the big issue. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is still the big issue. Is the Nigerian judiciary truly independent? Now, the debate is still on, and Professor Nwaokobia and Barrister Odiana is here to tell us what to believe. So let's dig in and go more on this. Now, Nwaokobia, you were trying to make a point before we went on that very quick break. Maybe you want to land quickly before I switch to Odiana.
Let me add that oftentimes when we expect a child, there's a popular parlance that also says that and that's what our positive public speakers try to happen. They tell you, oh, where there's hope, there's a way. Yeah. But you know what? You can't ask a child to pull himself off with a bootstrap if he does not have a boot. The tragedy of our system is that we have a judiciary that is almost ab initio, subservient, either by tendency, by impression, by executive meddlesomeness to the executive. They are waiting for instructions. They are waiting for, remember what happened in Port Harcourt? For about 2 years, the judiciary had to go on strike. Lawyers had to go on strike because the state governor at some point refused to appoint the chief judge of the state. Now, the judiciary, where the judiciary is left to wait at the instance, whatever the executive wants to do. If you want to remove Justice Tanko the way you removed Onoga, if you want to remove anybody the way you removed Salami, that does not underscore the independence of the judiciary. And so we're not saying that the judiciary is totally, absolutely subservient, but we're saying that what is necessary, that level of independence that is necessary to build trust of the viewers at home, of the listeners here, that level of independence is necessary to make you understand that the judiciary is indeed the last hope of the common man, does not exist. And the time has come for all those who truly mean well for this country to call a spade by its name. And that's why I insist that the responsibility, the onus on my brother here is monstrous. That you're coming to tell him, he's coming to tell us that the Nigerian masses should trust a judiciary that is just there, and then the executive gives instructions with respect to what kind of judgment they want. No, that's not the judiciary we want.
Come on. Now, we understand that the executive, the tenure of 4 years, sometimes 8 years, depending. And we know that the judicial system at some point in time outlive the tenure of the executive. Now, when you look at these instances, how would you really say that this particular body is dependent on an executive body that actually runs out of tenure and they are still in office? I mean, is there a way truly for you to make that assertion?
That would have been a profound argument if we had a system that calls the executive to order. Here we have executives who live like lords of the manor, who lives like Plato's man of gold, the all-knowing King Solomon. They give instructions, and you know what? When the executive can send state operators to your house, to your homes, to break down the doors and arrest you as a judicial officer, what will you do? Naturally, the first tendency of Homo sapien is to self-protect. And so what you have, knowing exactly what obtains in Nigeria, is that most judicial officers capitulate to the tendencies of the executive because they want to stay alive.
So if this is your fantastic. So if this is your stand, then what is the need for the oath of office?
Naturally, that's exactly why we're talking about the need for us to overhaul the appointing protocols of our judges. We have to look at how judges emerge, because he who hires can fire.
All right, come on, put your hands together for that. All right, Odiana, your stand is still very much on the reality that the judicial system is very, very independent. Now, he has given some instances as well. As much as I don't want us to stray from this argument to go into pockets of cases here and there, which might be too elaborate for us to handle, let us close the gap. You are opinion that the judiciary is very much independent. You must have an argument to actually displace this professor. We want to hear it quickly.
Well, he has agreed with me that, yes, there are some areas where our judiciary has lived up to expectation, in spite of some of these
very tiny instances.
He has said that. But as a lawyer, he also agreed with me that I think what we expect of the judicial officers is to assert themselves.
That's right.
The laws are there. The Judicial Service Commission, and of course, the fourth alteration in the Constitution has also made it available or easy for the funding of the judicial system, whether at the state level or the federal level, to be, to be possible without the usual interference of the executive arm of government. I think these are the issues we must look at. And we must speak to these provisions of the Constitution and drive it. We must heighten the advocacy level of what our Constitution and various acts have provided for, to drive the process and encourage judiciary to assert themselves. I will still maintain the position that the judiciary is independent. Independent to the extent of what just happened. Yesterday we said, oh, there was a script that was written by the executive to make judgment in favor of one political party or the other. As of today, if I then add the same set of people who now wrote the present script that dictate the judgment in Bayelsa State.
Come on, guys. Come on, guys.
So for that essence, we must give kudos to the judicial sectors and the operators. I agree, I do not pretend about that there could be some patterns of infractions, which I said in my opening remark as well, that is what is obtainable everywhere, anywhere in the world. There's always tendency on the part of the executive to usurp the powers or duties of the executive, of the judicial segment of the government. It happens in the US, it happens everywhere. The problem we have here is our inability to assert ourselves. The laws are there. All we need to do is to strengthen the judicial system by ensuring that the process of appointment is liberalized, to ensure that competent and capable people are appointed. At the same time, the advocacy must be increased to a certain level that even the judicial personnel will now see that we have protection from the public. But to say today that the judicial system has portrayed entirely to the executive arm of government, I do not agree with my learning.
Thank you very much. Come on, put your hands together. Now, Professor, the Constitution has actually ascertained and provided that independability of these arms. Now, that is the Constitution which we must respect. So where is your argument coming from? Because the Constitution has clearly given the separation of powers and given them independence. So where is your argument actually coming from in all of this? Are you citing the pockets of mishaps to actually judge an entire body, or you feel there is something that needs to be done that is not done? Or in your opinion, there must be something we know, you know, that we do not know?
First, the greatest challenge that we have is that we have one of the most powerful constitutions in the history of this country, in the history of humankind. We have a constitution that has made our president indeed the most powerful president in the world. That's point number one. Then point number two is the fact that we have a legislature, whether you like it or not, that is almost subservient. You know, the legislature proudly says that they will do what the executive wants. So it makes the judiciary in a very bad position. Now, that psychology of a meddlesome, almighty, all-powerful Leviathan called the executive puts the judiciary in a terrible position. And then we live in a country where, from independence up until now, we have judges who are almost always, maybe because of a militaryocracy that we had at some point, who are always scared of the executive. And unfortunately, tragically also, we have judges who are scared for their lives. We have judges who are careful about what happens. We have judges who do not want their homes broken into in the middle of the night. We have judges who are very willing, because of course I think it goes to the terms of the value of their remunerations too. If you are a judge that is paid 200,000 or 500,000 at the end of the month, and someone comes to you with 5 billion and says, sway justice, what would you do? You know, we live in a country where politics is monetized at all levels, heavily monetized. We live in a country where nobody calls the president to order, and the organ that should help the judiciary, as it were, those who make the laws, are unwilling to help assert the independence of the judiciary. And then you have a judiciary arm of government that is almost subservient. At the state level, the chief judge of the state is appointed through the instrumentality of the state governor. He who pays the piper calls the tune. The Chief Justice of the Federation is appointed through the instrumentality of the President of the Federal Republic. He who pays the piper calls the tune. And that's the tragedy of the Nigerian estate. We're saying that the time has come for us to liberalize the process, democratize the process, and allow the input of the NBA, for instance, the Nigerian Bar Association, and several other judicial arms to make appointments as to judges they truly believe in, as to judges they truly trust, not those that a select arm of the executive want to superintend over the judiciary.
Odiana, he has presented something very crucial. A case where you're paying a judge or a lawyer this amount of money and something else is brought into play. Isn't there a possibility for justice to be swayed?
Well, quite right. It's very possible to sway justice because of corruption. I think he's been very careful in using that word, because of greed on the part of some of the judges or justices. But again, we have so many of the judges or justices who perhaps are clean in every ramification. Yeah. So for me, yes, the process of selection, we have interrogated that enough. The remuneration of judges, like I said, the Constitution has made it clear for the payment of funding of the judicial sector to be on the first line, the consolidated fund. And the Constitution haven't been amended, the fourth alteration haven't made provision for that. It's for judges and perhaps in NBA, the Nigeria Bar Association, to perhaps, maybe have a debate, a conversation of that, and to ensure that the chief executives of the various states, make payment to the said fund or allow the payment to be done in a way that the chief judges of the various states or the judges will not go, cap in hand begging for funding.
Okay,
but
now,
that again
based on what
does not mean that the judiciary or the court is no longer the last hope of the common.
Fantastic. Now, based on what he just said, is it lack of funds also that is causing the problems we're experiencing in the judiciary today? Is it that the funds that is being disbursed is not enough to cater for the needs of these people who have the lives of individuals in their hands? Is that the reason why we're experiencing the mishaps we're experiencing in your sector?
Well, I cannot say exactly if that is the entire reason why we have this mishap.
But he just said it now. When money is presented, sometimes it could be you could have been compromised.
That is true. That is
money
true.
Speaks,
but we have some judges who have also rejected such Ghana must go from politicians and all that. We have some few cases in that manner. And I don't think Mr. Chris will have evidence of judges actually be giving money. Some of these things are just hearsay in order to demonize the judges and perhaps conclude that the entire judicial system is useless in Nigeria. Yes, I'm not saying there's no pockets of interference, but we must be careful. The idea of saying, because they are being manipulated and all that. That is why I asked this very last question, which perhaps Mr. Chris are not giving answer to. If perhaps we assume that money exchanged hand in the Imo State decision, if perhaps we assume that a script was dictated from the presidency for the Imo State decision, what then happens in the
different
Barrister
facts?
case?
Very easy. Different facts, different situations, different narratives. In the Imo case, number 4 becomes number 1. In the Bayelsa State issue, there was certificate forgery. And remember what the High Court said? That if the deputy governorship candidate of the APC...
And you believe that money wouldn't have taken care of that situation?
Just watch.
If our judiciary was
at
not
the High
independent?
At the High Court level, let me land you. The judge said that if the deputy governorship candidate of the APC were a woman, she would have married 5 husbands for her to be able to present that certificate. So it was a gross issue of forgery, a different scenario entirely. So those who juxtapose the Imo scenario with the Bayelsa scenario are being unfair. I think that the time has come for us to learn to call a spade by its name. We want a judiciary we can trust. And at the core of that is the independence of the judiciary.
But if there was a script, the executive would have been able to influence that judgment in Bayelsa too.
How do you transform, just by use of funds, a man to a woman? The clear case. I just told you that if the deputy governorship candidate were a woman, according to a High Court judge, she would have had to marry 5 husbands before she could present those certificates. But unfortunately, not being a woman, not having married 5 husbands, and remaining a man, the court had to rule that he forged his certificates. Now, in the Imo scenario, it was an entirely different scenario where, and I said this without fear of querulous critics and without any air of equivocation, that even the APC And those who stand on that side of the divide understand that the reality regarding the Imo judgment is just a judicial miracle, if you like. And that is working on the script. You must get a state for the APC in the Southeast. But I do sincerely think that the time has come beyond politicking with issues. Like I say, you don't politic with issues of national security, and you don't politic with issues regarding the judiciary. The time has come for us to assert and insist that all stakeholders in the Nigerian enterprise push for the independence of the judiciary, because as it stands today, the judiciary is not independent.
Thank you very much. Now, Odiana, I want to take you up on a quote by a former Chief Justice of Nigeria. Now, Honorable Justice Dahiru Mustafa once said, "It is regrettable that some state chief executives treat the judiciary as an appendage of the executive arm. The plight of the state judiciaries is compounded by the fact that in spite of the best efforts of the NJC, the processes of appointment and removal of judges, security of tenure is the subject of political theatrics."
But
all right. Now, this was a quote by a former Chief Justice of Nigeria. Now, with this quote being said, is there hope for your sector? Because you are here defending that the judiciary is very independent. But look, it's subject of political theatrics. Is what everyone is experiencing all over. I mean, how would you start and defend this once more?
The exaction of the SY Chief Justice of the Federation was trying to appreciate or interrogate the challenges we have in the sector. And perhaps if you see the entire script of that speech, you discover that the SYCJN made some recommendations or suggestions at the end of the day. I have never made a point that absolutely will have saints in the entire judicial sector. I have also not said entirely that we are perfect. But I am saying that the judicial system is independent. Independent, not without problems, but that those problems are surmountable and that those problems are part of the system. And that the way forward is for us to tinker with the process of selection. And that the laws are also actually there, but the people of Nigeria, mostly the NBA, Nigerian Bar Association, must play a role and also speak for themselves, because that is actually their farm, and for the entire system to ensure that those who are selected to the bench are people of impeccable character and, reputation. Because the issue of interference and all that, I've also seen a situation where it has been very difficult for some judges to be manipulated in the history of this country. If we must not completely demonize what the Supreme Court has done, because the assessment of the performance of the judiciary is traced down from whatever the Supreme Court is doing today. We must also not look backward and say, what did the Supreme Court do when the Vice President, Atiku Abubakar, was contesting on a different platform and Mr. President Obasanjo was still there as the elected president under the PDP? So we must read in between the line and know that as the Supreme Court is also not a court that gives decision whatever way we believe it should be done, but that it's a court that is cut out to stabilize the system. And in stabilizing the system, sometimes we misinterpret or misunderstood them as people who have either collected money or just read a transcript from the presidency. So from that angle, we must look at the system as, yes, we have challenges. Yes, we are not perfect. But at the end of the day, the court, the judicial system is still the last hope of the common.
Come on, thank you very much. Of course, now, thank you very much. Of course, this is still the big issue. The argument is still on. Now, Professor Nwaokobia says the Nigeria's judiciary is far from being independent. Now, going by recent judicial rulings, on the other hand, Barrister Eriata is saying that the judiciary may have registered some doubtful moments, but their independence is not questionable. Now, let's go on a very quick break, and when we return, the members of the audience will be weighing in on this issue. If you're just joining us, you've missed quite a bit, but of course, you are still right on the big issue. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is still the big issue. Now, we are still discussing the judiciary system, if the arm of law is independent or not. Of course, we've had several discussions back and forth, and it's been very, very tough because, of course, subject matters like this require a whole lot of, assertions here and there. But that is not to say the members of the audience do not have to, nothing to say about this as well. So we'll be taking questions from them, and let's see how we go with this. Quickly, what's your name and who you direct your question to? Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
My name is John Folarin. I am directing my question to Barrister Nwaokobia.
All right.
Sir, earlier you said that you called for a total overhaul of the selection process of the judiciary. But we know that that is being provided for in Chapter 7 of the Constitution. So how will the judiciary be overhauled, hence, since it is being provided for in the Constitution?
The first thing you have to note is that naturally, you don't fold your hands akimbo, mouths agape, and watch a system transform itself. You must agitate. You must push. Just like we noted in the course of laying our positions, the time has come for the NBA, the NJC, the leaders of the judiciary at various levels to push for. We have seen several alterations to the constitution that are fundamentally enabling of what should be. But unfortunately, even with the funds released to the first line charge, consolidated funds, how well is the judiciary funded? You can't be giving the National Assembly, for instance, of less than 600 persons, 120 billion. And then you give the judiciary far, far less. When the judiciary has the right to declare on the lives, the safety, and the dignity of the human persona. So I think that the time has come for us to push at every level and strata of agitation and involvement, engagement of the executives, for the judiciary to be overhauled effectively to advance the purposes for which we are debating today, which is the independence of the judiciary.
Thank you very much. Now, Barrister Odiana, based on what he just said, are we going to say that for the fear of loss of lives, or rather people fear for their lives, is the reason why they are not agitating? Because if truly the members of the House of Assembly have so much money, and they give them so much money, and the judicial system that is supposed to be controlling the nucleus of the nation is not giving that attention, I mean, how else can this be this agitation we are crying for? When should it happen? And if it has to happen, who should begin it? Who should start it?
I would say simply that what you are doing here today is part of the advocacy process.
That's right.
So we must commend the effort of your organization, your humble self, and the audience. What we are doing today is part of the advocacy process. The issue of corruption, like I said, sometimes it's not left with the underfunding of the judicial sector alone. Some of them are naturally corrupt, naturally, always have the tendency or propensity
to steal.
But they are very few.
All right.
And that is why I will be the last person to say that the courts are no longer the last hope of the common man, or that the entire judiciary has collapsed. Understand? So what we are doing is part of the process, and we believe that the judicial service commissions for the various states should be constituted for those states that have not been properly constituted, and their functions should be clearly laid out.
Right.
The idea is actually to regulate the process. If you see judges that are underperforming, or judges who are corrupt and all that, I think there should be amendment in some of those states or divisions. The same thing, or ditto, the federal judges. At the same time, the issue of funding, like he rightly said, the state governors and all that, you see, we were in part of the world where...
Here is it. If your system is truly independent, is it not obvious that you know the corrupt ones amongst you? And if there are corrupt ones amongst you, in order to sanitize that sector, is it not right to agitate for these guys to be removed? Is it unconstitutional for you guys to cry out and say this person cannot be taken out?
I will tell you this, that efforts are being made in that direction. For instance, in Lagos State, we have one or two NBA branches who have committees, ad hoc committees that perhaps interface between the judges and the bar. And the purpose of such committees is actually to expose and discuss or have conversation on some of these challenges that we have in terms of performance of the judges, in terms of funding and all that. So efforts are being carried out in that direction.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right, quickly.
My name is Ojo Daniel, known as Mr. Perfect. My question goes to you, sir. In your opening remark, you made mention about the former governor of Lagos State, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu's case of having other 37 LCDA, which the courts gave them the right to do so, but the federal withheld the allocation. Now, if the judiciary, if the court gives the states permission to do that, and the executive, I mean the federal, still owed the allocation until that regime is off, how are you going to convince me that the common man should still believe in judiciary, which there is no empowerment or, I mean, there is no enforcement from you mandating the federal to do what the court says?
Come on.
Mr. Perfect, your question is good. But we must look at that question in between the lines. First, what the Supreme Court said in that case, that the federal government does not have right to withhold allocation to Lagos State. That is the local government allocation. At the same time, the court did not say or ratify the creation of the additional local governments until and except there's an amendment in the Constitution. Must we not commend the judiciary to the extent that the Supreme Court came up with the judgment of the Superman, Mr. President, to say, no, you do not have the right to release, to withhold the allocation of Lagos State. Yes, you might say, as at that time, at that stage, the Supreme Court or the judiciary has lived up to expectation.
Come on. Just, it's okay. It's okay. Yes, who's the next man?
Now to Barrister. Look at the gray area he has mentioned, and you know we have a number of young ones, new entrant into the judiciary. Now, what are your advices, or what counsel will you give to those who are just coming?
The freshers.
The freshers. Of course, look at the gray areas he has given. What are your counsels for them to be able to say, either we like it or not, we are coming in to that place?
Come on, fantastic. You heard the first question.
Very, very profound question.
Right.
Let me say here that no society moves out of a nadir just applauding a system. We must all collectively challenge the system to proper conduct. That's point number one. Then point number two, you cannot just mention the failures and then arrogate a certain almightiness. I told you that at the core of our problem is a constitution that makes our president the most powerful president in the whole world. And that is why some of us have been saying consistently that the time to overhaul that constitution, the time to rework that constitution is now. And then you notice that of almost all the countries in the world, you have only about 42 presidential systems in the world. Because the world is increasingly beginning to find out that the presidential system tends to corrupt. Because power, like Lord Acton said, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And you have more nations in the world that practices the parliamentary system of government, where the legislature is able to effectively police the prime minister, who's one of them. Now, what is important is that we overhaul this constitution such that we no longer have the Tsar, the Plato's man of gold, the all-knowing King Solomon, the man who controls everything as president, where we will have a man who is first amongst equals, for instance, a prime minister in charge of government, and his colleagues can look him in the face. Look at what happened in the United Kingdom. On Brexit alone, almost about 3 prime ministers lost their positions. But here, Nigerians have been murdered in their scores. And somebody's telling you that we're going to do what we want to do. We won't do what you want. We won't sack the service chiefs. We won't do this because, as it were, we have a constitution that makes the president all-powerful. So I do sincerely think that we must join voice with those who are saying that the time to overhaul our constitution is now. We must join voice with those who are saying that the time to restructure this federation is now. We must join voice with those who are saying that the time for a general overhaul of our system is now.
My question is going to you, Prof. Actually, I like to say that I share part of your sentiment when you say that the judiciary is not independent, although not exactly, it's partly independent. And then I'd like to say that if truly that is what you believe, will it be out of place for us to, or people to look at you as an alarmist, as somebody who is a fearmonger, rather than providing or suggesting solutions? It's like you are actually, making people to fear, not to have hope in the judiciary. So what's your reaction?
One of the greatest philosophers of all times, albeit a scientist, Albert Einstein, who said that the first path to greatness is to admit where a system has failed.
Come on.
And we know that, like I quoted in my opening remark, Justice Odiana, who said that he could not rule otherwise because his hands were tied. We know that at several points in our history, our judicial officers have been compromised. We know that several times in our history, a meddlesome executive has tended, albeit almost consistently, to erode the independence of the judiciary. So what do? We admit that error. And then rather than sound like alarmists, we challenge the system to effective, efficient, and effectual reorganization of the protocol. And that's what I'm doing.
Come on.
I am saying that the time has come for us first to call a spade by its name and move to the next level, which is reworking the system to effectiveness and efficiency.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That should be the last question, right? All right, quickly. Your name and who you're directing your question to.
My name is Ugo Matthew, and I'm directing my question to you, sir.
All right.
So aside from judiciary independence, what other measure would you prescribe that can enhance good judicial atmosphere to the country?
Okay.
Well, I would say simply the rule of law.
All right.
The people of Nigeria, or the government, must at all times drive towards obeying the judgments and directives from our courts. And the people of Nigeria, whether the executive or the legislative, or even the judiciary itself, must begin to see the separation of power the way it is and ensure that there's no further interference, as being perceived by the people, that there's no further interference in the system.
Come on, put your hands together. We're done. Thank you very much. After all said and done, we're coasting home right now. If you're just joining us, this is still the big issue. Of course, let's take this to the next level as we'll be rounding this off. If the judicial system is independent or not. So far, I believe you have learned a thing or two from all the discussions we've had so far. At the point right now, we have to coast home. If you're just joining us once again, this is, of course, the big issue. Fantastic, if you're just joining us, this is still the big issue. It's been a mind-blowing section with the audience, and I'm sure the debaters also argue the positions very well. So we have come to the point where we need to say goodbye, but before we go, we have to take our final thoughts from our guests. Now, Barrister Odiana, let's be very frank. What are your final thoughts on this?
Well, my final thought is that the judiciary, or the court, still remain the last hope of the common man, and that there have been several interventions by the judiciary, by the judicial system, to stabilize the system. But at the same time, I also admit that we have some pockets of drift in the system, and the judiciary should be steadfast. They must continue to drive towards giving judgments without any fear of favor. They must, of course, also begin to see the supremacy of the rule of law and the supremacy of the Constitution as a watchword. They should continue to give judgment without any fear of fear or favor from any quarter. And I am sure we'll get to the next level as being promised.
Thank you very much. Come on, that is not loud enough. Come on. Thank you. All right, Prof, it's your turn now. Your final thoughts, quickly.
Like Lady Justice that has her eyes blindfolded, I pray and hope that this intervention in our sociopolitical discourse will affect the judiciary effectively. And I pray and hope that our judges will understand that to be the last hope of a common man, you must assert your independence. The time has come for the Nigerian people, including the NBA and the media, to challenge the judiciary to effective protocol in justice delivery. And at the core of it is the need for a truly independent judiciary. If we work at that, we can get it.
Thank you very much. Come on, put your hands together once again. Thank you. All right, before we go, we have a ritual quickly. Barrister, you can shake hands now. Yes.
My brother.
Put your hands together for them once again. I'll go back to you. All right, according to Chief Obafemi Awolowo, he did say that he who fails to plan is planning to fail. So we are not planning to fail, and that is why we have brought this issue to the fore on the big issue. When next we return, of course, it's going to be quite exciting as usual, but you can follow the conversation on our Twitter handles and, of course, at TVC Connect and at TVC News Nigeria. My personal handle is Mark Otabo. Until we come your way again, always remember that this is where we roll it. Anytime, any day, and keep you engaged on the big issue. Thank you very much.